The hall was bright like a sunrise made of glass. Crystal lights fell from the ceiling like frozen rain. Powerful people in fine suits clapped and smiled as two young men in matching tuxedos walked to the stage. They were tall, calm, and kind-looking, their faces clean, their hands steady. Everyone called them the Westwood twins, the new owners of a big company that built schools and hospitals for poor children. On the big screen behind them, the words glowed, Community Hero Award. Then one of the twins lifted the microphone and said, "Before we accept this award, we want to thank the person who fed us when we had nothing. We have been looking for her for years. If she is here, please come." A spotlight moved across the hall like a slow, curious eye. It stopped on a woman in a simple blue dress standing near the back. Her hands shook. Her name was Grace. She had come to work at the event as a last-minute cleaner, pushing a yellow bucket and a mop. Her mouth fell open. The twins looked straight at her. The crowd turned. The room was as quiet as sky at midnight. "Is that you, Miss Grace?" the other twin asked, voice growing soft. "The lady who used to meet us behind the bakery?" The room gasped. Grace's heart pounded like a drum. She took one step forward, and then the hall doors burst open. A woman in a silver dress, her old boss, stormed in with 2 guards and shouted, "Security! That is the thief who used to steal food from my house." The spotlight froze on Grace. The twins stared at the silver dress woman. The crowd whispered like wind in tall grass. Grace felt the floor tilt under her feet. Her past and her present crashed into each other like 2 waves in a storm. What happened next would change every life in that room. But before we reach that moment, you need to know how it all began. Grace was 18 when she became a maid in the big Parker house on Maple Street. The house looked like a castle with stairs that curved like a smile and windows that watched the world. Mrs. Parker was rich and strict. She liked things quiet, quick, and perfect. "No crumbs," she would say. "No noise, no mistakes." Her son Ethan was a quiet boy who often sat alone in his room drawing small boats on blue paper. The cook, Mr. Walter, was kind and heavy-set, with a laugh that rolled like a warm thunder. There was also a driver named Ben, who always smelled like mint gum and gasoline. Grace was poor, but she was pretty in a soft, simple way. Clear eyes, steady hands, and a smile that tried to make everyone feel safe. She wore the same 2 dresses to work, washing at night and drying by the window. When she walked to the bus stop each morning, she passed an alley beside a small bakery. There, under a torn billboard, 2 homeless boys sat close to each other like sparrows hiding from rain. They were twins, maybe 13, maybe 14. Their names were Noah and Nathan, though she didn't know that yet. When people walked by, some looked away, some gave coins, some just frowned. The twins kept close, as if their shadows were blankets. On her first week at the Parker house, Grace saw how the dining table groaned with food like a festival tree. Bread, fruit, roasted chicken, rice, thick soups, and cakes that looked too perfect to eat. After each meal there were leftovers, sometimes a lot, sometimes a mountain. Mr. Walter kept the good leftovers in labeled tubs, but many times when the fridge was full, he scraped plates into the trash. The sight made Grace's chest ache. She could hear her grandmother's voice from long ago. "Child, when your hand meets a hungry mouth, your hand becomes a bridge, and bridges are blessed." On the 4th day, Grace slipped 2 warm rolls and an apple into a small box and carried it in her bag. Her hands trembled the whole walk home. She told herself it was only one time. But when she reached the alley, she found the twins sitting with their arms around their knees, trying to share one old biscuit. The biscuit looked hard enough to use as a stone. Grace stepped close. "Hi," she said softly. "You can have this if you want." The boys looked up with fox-bright eyes. They stared at her the way a lost person stares at a light. One reached out slowly, as if he was afraid the box would vanish. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes," Grace said, "and there is more tomorrow." The twins ate like the food might run away. Grace stood nearby, watching, a warm feeling filling her chest like tea on a cold day. When they finished, the one with a small scar on his cheek wiped his mouth and whispered, "Thank you, miss." "What are your names?" Grace asked. "I'm Noah," said the scarred one, pointing to his chest. "He's Nathan." "How long have you been here?" They glanced at each other. "A while," Nathan said. "Our aunt moved away. We got lost in the city. It's okay. We're together." Grace nodded. She wanted to ask more, but she felt the night coming closer like a curtain. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said. Then she walked home quickly before her courage could melt. The next day she packed a bigger box, rice, chicken, 2 oranges, and a slice of cake wrapped in napkin. She told herself, "It's just leftovers. It would only go to waste." Still, she hid the box under her sweater, as if it were a small bird she needed to protect. At the alley, the twins were waiting. Their faces lit up when they saw her. The cake made them laugh without sound, like sunshine on their tongues. They ate, and then Noah pressed a shiny bottle cap into her palm. "Our treasure," he said, serious as a mountain. "For you." Every day after that, Grace carried a small box. Some days it was rice and beans. Some days it was soup in a jar wrapped with cloth. Some days it was bread and boiled eggs. She never missed a day, even when it rained and the wind pushed her like a busy hand. She told no one at the Parker house, not Mr. Walter, not Ben the driver, and certainly not Mrs. Parker. She felt the rightness of it like a heartbeat. She also felt the risk. Mrs. Parker didn't like surprises, and she liked control even more than she liked tea. Weeks turned to months. The twins grew a little stronger. Their cheeks filled out. Nathan found a job sweeping behind the bakery sometimes. The baker's wife would slip him a coin or two. Noah watched out for the younger kids in the alley, the way big trees shade small ones. They always met Grace with a smile, and the 3 of them created a quiet deal with the world. "We will not make noise. We will not scare the rich. We will only share kindness in small boxes." Then one evening something happened. Grace was wrapping fried plantains in parchment when Mrs. Parker walked into the kitchen early. "What are you doing with that food?" she asked, her voice sharp like a new needle. "Just cleaning up, ma'am," Grace said, palms sweaty. She managed to slip the parchment into the bottom of the trash so it wouldn't be seen. Mrs. Parker stared at her as if the truth were written on her forehead in chalk. Then she turned and left, her heels clicking like a clock counting down. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She kept seeing the twins' faces, and she kept hearing Mrs. Parker's heels. She decided to be more careful. The next day, she hid the box inside a stack of clean napkins. She walked out the side gate like a shadow, but Ben the driver was leaning against the wall, chewing gum, his eyes half closed. He squinted at the box. "Big lunch," he said. "It's for my bus ride," Grace answered, trying to smile. Ben shrugged. "Ride safe." He looked like a man who knew things and kept them in his pocket. A week later, Grace found a note under the kitchen clock. "No staff food out of the house. All leftovers must be recorded." It was neat, cold, and signed MP, Mrs. Parker. Grace's stomach turned, but the twins were waiting. She had never told them she might stop. She couldn't stand the thought of them sitting under the billboard with empty hands. So she did something brave and risky. She kept going. She wrote down fewer leftovers than there were. She learned to make boxes small and easy to hide. She smiled at Ben and walked fast. All the while, she saved her own small money in a tea tin, coins from extra chores and a little change from bus fare. Her dream was simple: find the twins a safe place. Even a bed in a church shelter would be better than the cold alley that bit their bones at night. One morning, rain came hard. The alley turned into a shallow river that carried wrappers and leaves like little boats. Grace found the twins shivering under a broken umbrella. She handed them a jar of soup and a blanket she had smuggled out under her coat. Noah touched the blanket as if it were made of light. "You shouldn't do all this," he said. "Someone will get angry with you." "Someone already is," Grace said, trying to joke. But the fear sat on her shoulder like a small, heavy bird. Days later, Ethan, the quiet Parker boy, came into the kitchen while Grace was washing dishes. "Do you like stories?" he asked, holding out a paper book with a cracked spine. "I do," she said. He smiled a little. "You can borrow this if you want." Grace opened the book that night and found a line that felt like a secret message. "A river does not drink its own water, and a tree does not eat its own fruit." She fell asleep with the book on her chest, and hope like a candle inside her. And then came the day everything shook. Mr. Walter had prepared extra food for a garden party: golden chicken, spiced rice, sweet corn, and small pies that looked like suns. So many leftovers. Grace wrapped a careful portion. She tucked it under her sweater and walked to the side gate. The sky was turning orange. Ben, the driver, leaned by the gate again. He looked at her sweater, then at her face. He smiled, not unkind. "You have a good heart, Grace," he said softly. "Be careful." "I will," she whispered. She didn't see Mrs. Parker behind the curtains of the upstairs window, watching with eyes like ice. Grace hurried to the alley. The twins were there, waiting with 2 younger kids. "We brought friends today," Nathan said shyly. "They're hungry too." Grace's chest warmed and hurt at the same time. She divided the food like a mother bird breaking bread with her beak. They ate and laughed, and for a moment the alley felt like a small, happy room. Then a black car turned into the lane and stopped near the bakery. The door opened. Heels hit the ground like small hammers. Mrs. Parker stepped out, shining and sharp, with 2 security guards behind her. Her eyes went from Grace to the twins to the box in Grace's hands. Her lip curled. "So," she said, voice cold as a winter river, "this is where my food walks to." Grace's mouth went dry. The twins stood up fast, their backs straight. Noah stepped in front of Nathan and the younger kids the way a wall steps in front of a storm. Mrs. Parker pointed at Grace. "You steal from me," she said. "You lie in my house, and you feed street rats with what belongs to me." She glanced at the guards. "Take her bag. Call the police." People in the bakery doorway froze. The alley, which had been warm with laughter, turned cold in an instant. Ben appeared near the corner, eyes wide, hands halfway raised, as if he wanted to help and didn't know how. "I didn't steal," Grace said, her voice shaking. "It was leftover food. It would have been thrown away." "It is not yours," Mrs. Parker snapped. "Nothing in my house is yours unless I say so." She looked at the twins with a tight, sour smile. "And you two, go find a job instead of begging." Noah's jaw clenched. "We didn't beg," he said. "She came to us." Mrs. Parker flipped her hair and pulled out her phone. "You will come with me now," she told Grace. "We will end this nonsense." Nathan squeezed Noah's sleeve. The younger kids began to cry, small sniffles that cut through the air. Grace felt a hot, fierce courage wake up inside her, the way fire leaps in dry wood. She stepped forward, putting herself between Mrs. Parker and the children. "They're just hungry," she said. "Please." "Enough," Mrs. Parker said. "Guards." One guard reached for Grace's arm. The alley held its breath. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere a bus hissed. Somewhere a cloud pulled across the sun, and the light dimmed like a warning. "No!" Noah shouted, stepping closer, fists tight. Ben took a step too. "Ma'am," he said, voice low. "Maybe—" "Silence!" Mrs. Parker said, raising her hand. Her phone was already dialing. "Police?" "Yes. I need an officer on Maple Street Alley. Theft. Trespassing." Grace's heart beat so hard she felt it in her throat. She looked at the twins, thin, brave, shaking, and at the smaller kids clinging to Nathan's shirt. She looked at Ben, torn and helpless. She looked at Mrs. Parker's hard eyes. A siren wailed in the distance, small but growing. And then, in that crowded, frightened second, something happened that no one expected. Ethan, the quiet Parker boy, ran into the alley, breathless. with Mr. Walter behind him, face pale. Ethan stared at his mother, then at Grace, then at the twins. He lifted the book with the cracked spine, the one he had lent Grace, and said, voice trembling but clear, "Mom, please." She didn't steal. She saved. Mrs. Parker turned, shocked to see her son there. The siren was louder now, closer, like a fast river racing over rocks. The guard's hand was still on Grace's arm. The twins stood like two young trees in a storm. The bakery door swung wider. People were watching. The sky was now a deep orange, like fire melting into night. And just as the siren turned into the mouth of the alley and red lights flashed against the brick, Mrs. Parker stepped forward, eyes full of anger, and shouted at the police car, "Over here! Arrest her!" The siren cut, the doors opened, boots hit the ground, and the officers started toward Grace. "Where are you watching from? If you're enjoying the story, please like the video, hit subscribe, and tell me your city or country in the comments so I can shout you out." The red and blue lights bounced off the wet alley walls, painting Grace's frightened face with fire. The police officer stepped forward, tall and serious, his badge catching the last drop of sunlight. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, his eyes moving from Mrs. Parker in her glittering dress to Grace trembling with the food box in her hand. Mrs. Parker marched toward him with the confidence of someone who thought money could command anything. "Officer, that maid has been stealing food from my house for months. I caught her red-handed giving it away to these street children. Arrest her immediately." Gasps filled the bakery doorway. Grace wanted to speak, but her throat felt like it was tied with a rope. Her heart pounded as the officer turned to her. "Miss, is this true? Did you take food without permission?" Before Grace could answer, Noah stepped forward. His voice, though shaky, carried the strength of someone who had suffered long enough. "She didn't steal. She gave us food that was going to be thrown away. She saved us from starving." His brother Nathan nodded fiercely, his small hands clenched. "We'd be dead if not for her." The crowd murmured, eyes darting between the twins and Grace. Mrs. Parker's lips twisted in disgust. Street rats lying for their thief. What else is new? And then Ethan, Mrs. Parker's own son, surprised everyone. He stepped closer, holding out the old book Grace had borrowed from him. His voice trembled but carried truth. "Mom, Grace is not a thief. She is the only one who acts like a human in this house. She fed them when you would rather throw food in the trash. Isn't kindness worth more than control?" The officer's eyes narrowed. He looked at Mrs. Parker, then at Ethan, then at Grace. For a moment, the alley was frozen, caught between justice and cruelty. Grace's voice finally broke free. "I didn't steal. I only took what no one wanted. And if that makes me guilty, then I will not deny it. But I will not stand here ashamed for feeding hungry children." The officer studied her for a long moment. The twins stood tall beside her, their eyes burning with hope. The bakery owner muttered, "She's telling the truth. I've seen those boys out here starving." Mrs. Parker raised her voice, sharp as broken glass. "Enough of this nonsense. Officer, do your job." But the officer slowly shook his head. "Ma'am, I don't see a crime here. Taking food that would be thrown away and giving it to children who would starve, that's not theft. That's mercy." The crowd clapped softly, then louder, until the alley echoed with support. Mrs. Parker's face turned red with fury. She pointed at Grace, her voice dripping venom. "You're finished in my house. By tomorrow morning I want you gone." Grace's heart sank, but before she could speak, Ethan's small, steady voice cut through the noise. "If she leaves, I'll leave too." The crowd gasped. Mrs. Parker froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What did you just say?" Ethan's hands trembled, but his eyes didn't. "You taught me nothing about kindness, Mom. Grace did. If she goes, I go." The officer looked between them. The crowd fell silent, and Grace's world shifted beneath her feet. She had expected punishment, but not this clash of hearts, this stand of a boy against his own mother. Mrs. Parker's jaw tightened. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice dangerous. The officer turned and walked back to his car, leaving the alley heavy with tension. The bakery owner ushered the smaller kids inside, but the twins stayed put, eyes on Grace. Grace clutched the food box tighter, not knowing if tomorrow would bring shelter or hunger, safety or destruction. But she knew one thing. The line had been crossed. There was no going back. And as Mrs. Parker stared at her son with fury in her eyes, Grace realized this fight was far from over. The night settled in, thick and silent. But inside that silence, seeds of change had been planted. Seeds that would one day grow into a surprise Grace could never have imagined. But for now, as the streetlights flickered on, Mrs. Parker hissed the words that would alter everything. "Grace, pack your things, you're done in my house. Drop your city or country in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe." The Parker mansion looked colder that night than it ever had before. Its tall windows glowed with white light, but to Grace, they felt like the sharp eyes of a giant waiting to crush her. She stood at the side gate with her small bag in hand, her heart aching. She had only 2 dresses, a pair of old shoes, and the tea tin where she had saved her coins. That was all she owned in the world. Inside, the air smelled of polish and silence. Mrs. Parker sat in the grand living room, her silver dress glittering under the chandelier. She didn't look up when Grace entered. Instead, she sipped tea slowly, each clink of the cup on the saucer like the strike of a hammer. "You embarrassed me today," Mrs. Parker said coldly. "Do you know how much damage you've caused? A maid, caught feeding street children in front of half the town. Do you want me to be the laughingstock of Maple Street?" Grace stood with her head lowered. "I never meant to embarrass you, ma'am. I only wanted to help." Mrs. Parker slammed the teacup down so hard that tea splashed onto the table. "Help! Help! Who gave you the right to decide what happens to my food? You are nothing here, Grace. Nothing but a servant who should know her place." Her words cut deeper than knives. Grace bit her lip, her hands shaking, but she forced herself to stay calm. "If being nothing means giving children food, then I am proud to be nothing." For a moment, the air in the room grew so tight that even the chandelier seemed to stop swinging. Then came a sharp slap across Grace's face. Mrs. Parker's hand trembled with fury. "You ungrateful girl," she hissed. "By sunrise tomorrow you will be gone, and if you ever step foot near my house again, I will make sure the whole city knows you as a thief." Tears burned Grace's eyes, but she swallowed them. She turned slowly toward the staircase where Ethan stood, pale and trembling. He had heard every word. "Mother," Ethan said, his voice soft but firm, "if she goes, I go." Mrs. Parker's face twisted with disbelief. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do," Ethan replied. "Grace is the only person who makes this house feel alive. Without her, it's just a prison." Silence crashed down. Even the ticking clock seemed to hold its breath. Grace's eyes widened. She never expected Ethan to stand up for her like this. Mrs. Parker's voice shook with rage. "You will not shame this family. Do you hear me? You will not." But Ethan stepped down the stairs, one careful step at a time, until he was beside Grace. His hand trembled, but he placed it gently on her shoulder. Grace whispered, "Ethan, please don't. Don't do this for me." But Ethan only looked at his mother and said, "I'd rather stand with her than sit in your cold riches." Mrs. Parker's hands clenched into fists. Her breath came heavy, like a storm building inside her chest. You dare defy me for a maid?" Her voice grew louder, echoing through the walls of the mansion. At that exact moment, the front doors burst open. Mr. Walter the cook came running in, his face pale and sweaty. Behind him, Ben the driver looked equally shaken. "Ma'am," Walter shouted, "there's a fire in the garden. The whole shed is burning." The house jolted alive with panic. Mrs. Parker gasped, rising to her feet. Servants rushed from the corners, voices overlapping in fear. Ethan and Grace froze, still standing side by side. Through the tall glass doors, red flames licked the night sky. The glow painted the garden in wild, angry colors. Smoke curled upward like black snakes. "Dear heavens," Mrs. Parker whispered. Then she snapped toward Grace. "Don't just stand there. Move!" But Grace was already running, her feet flying toward the garden where the fire roared louder and brighter. Something inside her told her this fire was not just flames. It was the beginning of something bigger, something that would change all their lives forever. Drop your city or country in the comments and subscribe. The garden looked like a piece of the sun had fallen to earth. Flames clawed up the wooden shed where Mrs. Parker kept her extra furniture and party supplies. Sparks leapt into the night, and smoke swirled so thick that it stung Grace's eyes. Servants shouted and ran back and forth with buckets of water, but the fire only grew louder, hungrier. Grace grabbed a bucket from the line and ran toward the blaze. Heat slammed into her face like a wall, but she didn't stop. She threw water at the flames, coughing as smoke wrapped around her throat. Ethan was right behind her, carrying another bucket, his cheeks streaked with soot. "Stay back," one of the guards shouted. "It's too dangerous." But Ethan shook his head. "I won't stand by while our house burns." The servants worked together, throwing bucket after bucket, their voices hoarse with fear. Yet no matter how much water they poured, the fire spread, leaping from the shed to the wooden fence, climbing like a beast with too many legs. And then Grace's sharp eyes caught something. In the middle of the fire, inside the shed, there was a locked chest, half burned but still holding on. Through the crack of the open door she saw it, shiny, metal, and strange. She froze. That chest didn't look like old furniture storage. It looked important. Mrs. Parker rushed into the garden, her silver dress now dark with ash at the edges. "Save the chest!" she screamed, pointing at it. "Forget the shed! Save the chest!" The servants blinked, confused. Why the chest? Why not the whole shed? But her voice was sharp, desperate, and unrecognizable. Grace's heart pounded. Something told her that chest carried a secret Mrs. Parker would do anything to protect. And then it happened. With a loud crash, the roof of the shed gave way, showering sparks into the night. The chest tipped forward, its metal side glowing red-hot, then burst open as a burning beam smashed against it. Papers flew out, hundreds of them, whirling into the night air like fiery birds. Everyone gasped. Grace reached for one that floated near her. The edges were singed, but the words on it were clear. It wasn't just paper. It was a legal document. Her eyes widened as she read the bold letters at the top. Adoption certificate. The name beneath it made her blood run cold. Noah and Nathan Westwood, the homeless twins. Grace's hands shook. The fire roared, the crowd screamed, and Mrs. Parker lunged forward, snatching the paper from her grip. Her face twisted with fury. "You saw nothing," she hissed, shoving the half-burned page into her dress. But Ethan had already seen it too. His eyes widened in shock, his voice trembling. "Mother, what is that? Why do you have their adoption papers?" The servants murmured, their whispers circling like bees. Ben the driver took a step closer, his jaw tight. Mr. Walter shook his head, muttering, "Dear Lord in heaven." Mrs. Parker's chest rose and fell. She looked cornered, like a lion trapped in its own cage. Her eyes darted to the crowd, then back to Ethan, then to Grace. "Enough!" she shouted. "Everyone go back inside, now!" But no one moved. The papers were still floating down, landing in the wet grass, half burned but still readable. The secret was spilling faster than the fire could eat it. And just then, a voice came from behind the crowd, steady and familiar. "We already know," it said. Everyone turned. There, standing at the garden gate, were Noah and Nathan, the homeless twins, faces lit by the glow of the fire, eyes steady as stone. The world seemed to stop. Grace's breath caught. Ethan staggered back, Mrs. Parker's face drained of color. The twins stepped forward together, their voices calm but sharp as knives. "And tonight, the truth will finally come out." Tell me your city or country in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The night air tightened like a drum skin as Noah and Nathan walked through the garden gate. Their worn clothes were no match for the fire's glow, but their presence carried more power than all the guards in Mrs. Parker's mansion. Mrs. Parker's lips quivered, her eyes darting between them and the half-burned adoption papers still scattered on the wet grass. "You," she stammered, her voice breaking, "you have no right to be here." But Noah's voice cut through her words like a blade. "We have every right. Those papers prove it." He bent down, picked up a charred document, and held it high for all the servants to see. The flames behind him painted his figure like a warrior stepping out of a battlefield. "We were adopted. By you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The servants clutched their mouths, and Mr. Walter dropped the bucket he was holding. Ethan's face turned pale. "Mother, is it true?" Mrs. Parker's eyes flashed like a trapped animal. She tried to snatch the paper from Noah, but he stepped back. Nathan, his twin, raised his voice, trembling but fierce. "You took us in once. We were babies. You signed those papers, but you threw us away like garbage when your pride got in the way. Do you remember? Do you remember what you said the night you left us on the street?" Mrs. Parker's face crumpled, but she said nothing. The servants leaned closer, curiosity and horror mixing on their faces. Grace's heart pounded as she stared at the twins. She had known they carried pain, but she never imagined this truth. Nathan's voice cracked. "You told us, 'No one must know I raised children from the gutter. You are not worthy of my name.' And you drove away." The crowd gasped again. Ethan's knees seemed to buckle. He reached out, holding onto the edge of a garden bench. His voice came out in a whisper, but everyone heard it. "You abandoned them? Your own adopted children?" Mrs. Parker's chin lifted in defiance, though her hands trembled. "I did what I had to do. This family has a reputation, a name to protect. Do you think the city would respect me if they knew I raised gutter rats as my own?" Her words stabbed the night. Silence fell, sharp and heavy. Grace felt her stomach twist with disgust. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but strong. "Children are not trash. They are not stains on your reputation. They are blessings. You threw away blessings, Mrs. Parker." Mrs. Parker turned on her, eyes blazing. "Silence, you ungrateful maid. You don't know what it means to carry a name that must stay spotless." But Grace didn't flinch. For once, she stood tall, no longer just a maid in a faded dress, but a protector of truth. "No, ma'am," she said firmly. "You don't know what it means to carry a heart that must stay pure." The servants began to murmur louder, their voices circling Mrs. Parker like a tide closing in. Even Ben, who always kept quiet, finally spoke. His deep voice rumbled with anger. "I drove that car the night you left them, ma'am. I begged you not to do it, but you forced me. I carried the guilt every day since." All eyes turned to Ben. His words were heavy, undeniable. Mrs. Parker staggered back, her power slipping like water through her fingers. Noah clenched his fists, his eyes burning. "Do you know how many nights we slept in the rain? How many days we went without food? All because you chose pride over love?" Nathan's tears glistened in the firelight. "We never asked to be born. We only asked to be loved." The garden went silent again, broken only by the hiss of the dying fire. Grace felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She couldn't hold them back anymore. Ethan finally lifted his head. His voice was soft but sharp, like glass breaking. "Mother, I cannot call you mother anymore," Mrs. Parker gasped. "Ethan, don't you dare!" But Ethan raised his hand, stopping her. His eyes brimmed with tears, but his voice grew stronger. "From tonight on, I will stand with Grace, and with Noah and Nathan, because they are more my family than you have ever been." The servants broke into whispers, some nodding, some shaking their heads. Mrs. Parker's face drained of color. She looked around and realized she was surrounded, not by respect, but by judgment. The mighty woman of Maple Street, who had always walked with her head high, was now cornered by the truth she tried to bury. And then, in her rage, she did something no one expected. She raised her trembling finger, pointed at the twins, and screamed, "If you think you can ruin me, you're wrong. I will destroy all of you before I let this city see me as a failure." Her voice cracked, echoing in the garden. The servants froze. Grace's heart skipped. And just then, just as her words cut the night, blue headlights swept across the driveway, a sleek black car rolled in, and out stepped a man in a dark suit. His face was hard, his eyes sharp as steel. He looked at the burning shed, the scattered papers, the crying twins, and the trembling Mrs. Parker. Then he said, his voice deep and commanding, "Margaret Parker, I warned you that one day the truth would find you." The crowd gasped again. Mrs. Parker's knees buckled. Grace clutched her chest. Who was this man, and what truth did he carry? Drop your city or country in the comments and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss. The garden fell so silent that the only sound was the crackle of dying flames. The man in the black suit stepped closer, his shoes crunching against the gravel. His presence was like a storm entering the room, heavy, sharp, and impossible to ignore. Mrs. Parker's face turned pale, her lips trembling. You... It can't be you." The man removed his sunglasses, and the firelight revealed stern eyes filled with anger and pain. "It is me, Margaret, Richard Westwood, their father." Every heart in the garden skipped a beat. Grace gasped. Ethan's mouth fell open. The servants exchanged shocked whispers. Noah and Nathan froze, their bodies stiff, their faces locked between disbelief and rage. "You abandoned them," Richard continued, his voice echoing through the night. "You signed the papers with me. You promised to raise them when tragedy struck. But instead of giving them love, you threw them away like they were scraps from your golden table." Mrs. Parker's voice shook. "You don't understand. I had to think about my reputation, my family name." "Your family name?" Richard cut her off, his voice like thunder. "And what about my sons? Did they not deserve a name? Did they not deserve love? You hid the truth, Margaret, and for years I searched for them, thinking they were lost. Only tonight did I learn the truth, that you are the one who left them to rot." The crowd gasped again. Grace's hands shook as she looked at Noah and Nathan, who stood frozen in shock. Nathan's voice was barely above a whisper. You're our father?" Richard turned toward them, his face softening. "Yes, I am your blood father. Your mother, my wife, died when you were born. I was broken, and I trusted Margaret, her cousin, to raise you. She swore to protect you, but instead..." His voice cracked, his chest heaving. "She betrayed us all." The truth struck like lightning. Grace's knees nearly gave way. Ethan stumbled back, his hand clutching the railing of the garden steps. The servants pressed closer, their faces pale with shock. Mrs. Parker shook her head violently. "No, they were too much for me. 2 babies, crying, needing everything. I didn't want the burden. I didn't want to waste my life on gutter children." Noah's fists clenched, his jaw trembling. "We weren't gutter children. We were your family." His voice rose, raw and sharp. "Do you know how many nights Nathan and I nearly froze to death? Do you know how many times we prayed someone would claim us? And all along, the person who should have cared for us was living in a mansion." Nathan broke into tears, his shoulders shaking. Grace pulled him into her arms, holding him tight. She whispered softly, "You're not alone anymore." Richard's face darkened with fury as he turned back to Mrs. Parker. "You had everything, money, servants, respect, and yet you couldn't open your heart to 2 children who needed you most. Margaret, you are more empty than any beggar on the street." Mrs. Parker's knees buckled, but she caught herself against the garden table. Her pride wouldn't let her fall completely. "You think you can just walk in here after all these years and judge me? They are nothing, Richard. Nothing." The word nothing echoed across the garden like poison. The servants gasped in horror. Ethan stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Stop it, Mother, stop. They are not nothing. They are my brothers." The world seemed to stop. Ethan's voice rang clear, stronger than it had ever been before. He turned to the twins, his eyes wet. "I didn't know, but now I do, and I will stand with you, whatever it takes." Grace's heart swelled with pride as she watched him. For the first time, the Parker boy looked like a man of courage. Richard's voice grew steady again, cutting through the night. "From this moment forward, I claim my sons, Noah, Nathan. You will no longer live in shadows. You will no longer be hungry. Everything I own is yours, as it always should have been." The twins looked at each other, their eyes wide with disbelief. Then, slowly, hope bloomed across their tired faces like the first rays of morning. Mrs. Parker screamed, her voice cracking like glass. "You cannot do this. This is my house, my world. You will not take it from me." But Richard's eyes were steel. "It was never yours, Margaret. It was built on lies, and tonight those lies end." At that moment, thunder rumbled in the sky as if the heavens themselves were agreeing. Rain began to fall, hissing against the smoldering fire, washing the ash from the garden. Grace looked up at the rain, tears mixing with the drops on her face. She felt it deep in her soul. A new chapter was beginning, not just for Noah and Nathan, but for all of them. And yet, just as hope began to rise, Mrs. Parker staggered back, her eyes wild. "If you think I'll let you ruin me, you're mistaken," she spat. "If you think you'll take everything I've built, you'll regret it." Her voice cracked into a scream. "I'd rather burn it all down than watch you steal it from me." Everyone froze. The servants gasped. Ethan's eyes widened. Richard stepped forward, but Mrs. Parker was already running toward the mansion doors, her heels striking the wet stone like lightning bolts. What she planned to do next would push them all into danger none of them saw coming. Share your city or country in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss. Rain poured harder, soaking the garden until puddles formed under everyone's feet. Servants huddled together, whispering in fear. Richard barked an order for someone to follow Margaret, but she was already gone, her silver dress flashing once before vanishing into the mansion's shadow. Ethan bolted after her. "Mother, stop!" Grace's instincts screamed danger. She grabbed Nathan's hand, urging him and Noah toward the veranda for shelter. The twins resisted. Noah's jaw tightened. "She's going to do something terrible. I know it." Inside the mansion, the sound of crashing echoed, glass breaking, furniture scraping. Then a loud bang shook the walls. Ethan's voice carried down the hallway. "Mother, please, don't!" Richard charged through the front doors with 2 guards, Grace and the twins right behind him. The servants poured in as well, dripping water across the polished marble. The grand hall was chaos, vases shattered, paintings ripped from walls, and in the center stood Margaret Parker, wild-eyed and drenched. In her hands she held a brass oil lamp, its flame flickering dangerously close to the curtains. Gasps rippled through the hall. Grace's chest tightened. If she dropped that lamp, the entire mansion could turn into a death trap. Richard's voice thundered. "Margaret, put it down!" Her laugh was sharp, almost broken. "You think you can strip me of my power, Richard? Take my son, my home, my name. If I can't have it, then no one will." She raised the lamp higher, her arm trembling with rage. "Mother!" Ethan's voice cracked as he stepped forward, his palms out. "Please, don't do this. You're not thinking clearly." Margaret's eyes flicked to him, softer for a brief moment. "You're my only child, Ethan. My blood. Will you betray me too?" Ethan's face was wet with tears. His voice trembled, but it carried strength. "You lost me the day you abandoned them. I won't stand by your cruelty anymore." Margaret froze, her mouth quivering, the firelight reflecting in her eyes. For a split second, it seemed she might lower the lamp, but then her pride surged back like a wave. Her arm swung down toward the curtains. "No!" Grace screamed, leaping forward. She collided with Margaret, knocking the lamp from her hand. It clattered across the floor, spilling oil as it rolled, flames licking hungrily at the rug. Screams erupted. Servants scrambled for water. Richard rushed to stamp it out with his coat, while Noah and Nathan grabbed wet cloths from the table, beating the flames before they spread. Smoke filled the hall, choking and bitter. When the fire was finally smothered, silence fell again, except for Margaret's sobs. She had fallen to her knees, her dress smeared with soot, her hair wild, her voice broken. It was all supposed to be mine, all of it, my name, my power, my respect. Richard stood over her, his face hard but tired. And now look at what's left. Ashes. Ethan turned away, tears streaming freely. Grace knelt beside him, her hand brushing his shoulder. "You did the right thing," she whispered. Noah helped Nathan to his feet, both of them coughing from the smoke. Their eyes met Richard's, searching for answers. Richard's expression softened. "Come home with me. You deserve better than this nightmare." The twins looked at each other, hesitant. For years they had only trusted each other. Could they now trust the man who had left them, even unknowingly, in Margaret's care? Before they could answer, Margaret suddenly raised her head. Her voice, though cracked, carried venom. "You think this is over? You've won nothing. The city belongs to me, not to gutter boys or the maid who fed them." Her words stabbed the air, freezing everyone again. Grace stared at her in disbelief. Even broken, even exposed, Margaret clung to her pride like a drowning woman clings to driftwood. And then Richard, calm but firm, delivered words that silenced her. "No, Margaret. The city will soon know who you truly are. Tomorrow, every paper, every courtroom, will see these adoption documents. Your name will no longer be respected. It will be remembered for betrayal." Margaret's eyes widened, her breath catching. For the first time, fear cracked through her pride. The hall pulsed with tension. Grace could feel it. This was no longer just about food or even family. This was about legacy, power, and justice. And as lightning flashed through the windows, Noah finally spoke, his voice low but sharp. "If the world is going to hear the truth, then they should hear it from us." All eyes turned to him. Noah stepped closer, his brother at his side. "We've been silent long enough. Tomorrow we tell our story, all of it." Grace's chest swelled with pride, but her heart raced with fear, because she knew Margaret Parker would not go down quietly. And she was right. For deep in Margaret's eyes, behind the fear and tears, a spark of defiance still glowed, a spark that promised the fight was far from over. Drop your city or country in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss. The storm raged outside, thunder shaking the windows as if the heavens themselves were furious with what had unfolded inside the Parker mansion. Servants whispered nervously in corners, too shaken to return to their duties. The smell of smoke lingered in the air, clinging to the velvet curtains and marble floors. Noah and Nathan stood shoulder to shoulder, their thin frames straightened by new courage. "Tomorrow," Noah said firmly, "we tell the world. We'll let everyone know what she did to us." Nathan nodded, his eyes red but steady. "We're not hiding anymore. If she wants to destroy us, let her try. We survived the streets. What more can she do?" Richard placed his hands on their shoulders, pride glinting in his eyes. "You are my sons, and this time I will stand with you." Grace's heart swelled at his words. For the first time she saw light shining on the boy's future, like dawn breaking after a long night. She whispered softly, "The truth always wins." But Margaret Parker, still on her knees, lifted her head with a slow, dangerous smile. Her eyes gleamed like wet glass, sharp and bitter. "You really think the world will believe you?" Her voice dripped with venom. "You think anyone will take the side of homeless rats and a poor maid over me, Margaret Parker, the woman this city respects?" Richard's jaw tightened. "Respect built on lies is nothing but sand, Margaret. Tomorrow the tide will wash it away." Margaret's laughter cracked through the hall like lightning. "You don't understand. I own this city. I sit on every board, fund every school, dine with every politician. My name is carved into the very bones of Maple Street. If you try to bring me down, I'll drag you all into the dirt with me." Her words sent a chill through the room. Grace clutched her skirt, suddenly unsure. Could Margaret be right? Could she truly twist the truth to her advantage? Ethan stepped forward, his voice breaking the silence. "Then we'll tell our story louder than your lies." He turned to Noah and Nathan. "We'll stand together, me, Grace, Father, and both of you. You're not alone anymore." The twins exchanged a glance, and for the first time since arriving, they smiled faintly. Richard nodded. "Tomorrow, we'll call the press. The documents will be shown publicly. I'll bring every lawyer I know. Your story will no longer belong to Margaret. It will belong to the world." The servants, emboldened by his words, began to murmur in agreement. Ben, the driver, stepped forward, his voice deep and steady. "I'll testify. I drove the car that night. I saw her abandon them. My silence has haunted me long enough." Mr. Walter, the cook, followed. "I'll stand too. I remember the crying babies. I remember how she pretended they never existed." A ripple of courage moved through the room. For once, Margaret was outnumbered not by wealth, but by truth. But instead of breaking, her expression hardened. She rose slowly to her feet, her silver dress torn, her hair tangled, yet her pride unshaken. "You may think you've won tonight," she spat, "but you don't know me. You don't know the lengths I'll go to protect what's mine." Her words chilled Grace's blood. She recognized that tone. Margaret wasn't finished. She was planning something. The clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the smoke-filled hall. Grace looked at the twins and whispered urgently, "We must be careful. She's dangerous when cornered." Noah's fists tightened. "Let her try. We're ready." But Nathan's eyes flickered with unease. What if she does something worse than tonight? No one had an answer. Outside, the storm finally began to fade, leaving behind a heavy silence. But inside, the air was alive with dread. And just when the tension seemed to calm, the front doors slammed open again. A messenger, drenched from the rain, rushed in carrying a sealed envelope. He looked around the room, his chest heaving, then handed it straight to Richard. Richard broke the seal, his eyes scanning the paper. His face paled and his hands shook. "It's from the mayor's office," he whispered. Grace leaned closer. "What does it say?" Richard's voice cracked as he read aloud. "Due to a formal complaint filed against your sons, Noah and Nathan Westwood, the police will arrive tomorrow morning to take them into custody for charges of theft and trespassing." The room erupted in chaos. Grace's eyes widened in horror. Ethan shouted, "That's impossible!" The servants gasped, shaking their heads. Noah and Nathan froze, their faces drained of color. And Margaret smiled. She had struck her first counterattack. Tell me your city or country in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss, The hall exploded with shouts. Servants argued, Ethan slammed his fists on the table, and Grace rushed to Noah and Nathan, clutching their trembling hands. The twins' faces were pale, their bodies stiff as stone. "This is her doing," Grace whispered fiercely. "She filed that complaint. She's trying to silence you before you can speak." Richard's voice thundered over the noise. "Enough! Everyone, quiet!" The hall fell still, save for the distant boom of thunder. He held the mayor's letter in his fist, his jaw tight. "She's pulling strings. Margaret has friends in high places, and she's using them to destroy her own blood." Margaret smirked, leaning against the staircase like a queen regaining her throne. "It's already in motion, Richard. By sunrise, your sons will be in a cell where they belong. The city will laugh at your claims. 2 homeless thieves pretending to be heirs. No one will believe you." Nathan's voice cracked. "We're not thieves." His chest heaved with anger. "We never stole anything." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Then explain why the bakery down the street lost money and food every week while you 2 lived in their alley." Gasps rippled through the servants. Grace's head snapped toward her. "That's a lie! They never—" But Margaret raised her hand to silence her, savoring every word. "The report is already written. By morning the police will have all the evidence they need, and when the public hears about it, do you think anyone will believe your little sob story?" Noah's fists clenched until his knuckles turned white. He looked ready to lunge at her, but Richard pulled him back. "No, son. That's what she wants, for you to lose control and give her more reason to call you a criminal." Grace's heart pounded. She could see the trap tightening. Margaret wasn't just fighting with words anymore. She was playing the law against them. Ethan stepped forward, his voice sharp. "If they arrest Noah and Nathan, the story will die before it even begins. She'll win." Grace's mind raced. She thought of the adoption papers, the servants' testimonies, the truth waiting to be told. But the city wouldn't listen to them if the twins were behind bars. Suddenly, an idea lit inside her like a spark in the dark. It was reckless, dangerous, but it was their only chance. She grabbed Richard's arm. "We need proof, something bigger than her lies. If we can find the original adoption contracts, hidden records, anything she kept, we can expose her before the police arrive." Richard frowned. "The documents we saw in the fire were only fragments. Where would the rest be?" Grace's eyes darted toward the grand staircase. "In her study. She has a locked cabinet. I've cleaned around it 100 times. She never lets anyone touch it. That's where she hides things." Margaret's smirk faltered for the first time. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, toward the very study Grace had named. That was all the confirmation Grace needed. Ethan caught it too. He turned to his father and the twins. "If we can get those documents tonight, we can show them to the mayor before the police arrive. The truth will crush her lies." The servants began murmuring again, excitement mixing with fear. Margaret, realizing she'd been caught, shouted, "Don't you dare! That cabinet is private. No one is allowed in my study." Richard's voice boomed. "Your privacy has already cost these boys their childhoods. Tonight, your secrets end." 2 guards stepped forward at his command. The house trembled with the weight of what was about to happen. Grace's pulse raced. She was about to step into the lion's den. Noah and Nathan stood taller now, fire in their eyes. "We'll go with you," Noah said firmly. "If those papers prove who we are, we'll see them with our own eyes." Grace took a deep breath, her hands trembling but her spirit strong. She had started with nothing more than small food boxes hidden under her sweater, but now she was about to lead them into a fight that could either set the twins free or doom them forever. As the group moved toward the staircase, Margaret's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You fools. Open that cabinet, and you'll regret it for the rest of your lives." Her words dripped with menace, sending a shiver down Grace's spine. The storm outside roared louder, rattling the windows as if the night itself was warning them. And with every step closer to the study, Grace knew they were about to uncover something far darker than anyone imagined. Drop your city or country in the comments, and subscribe. The hallway to Margaret Parker's study felt longer than any hallway Grace had ever walked. The storm outside rattled the windows, lightning flashing across the walls like restless spirits. Every step closer made her chest tighten. Behind her, Noah and Nathan clung to each other, their eyes wide but determined. Richard walked ahead, his shoulders squared, while Ethan kept glancing back at his mother, who still stood in the hall, her face twisted with rage and fear. At the door of the study, Richard nodded to the guards. They forced the lock with a loud crack. The door swung open, releasing a gust of stale air that smelled of dust, ink, and secrets. The room was lined with shelves, every book and file neatly arranged. But Grace's eyes went straight to the tall mahogany cabinet in the corner, the one she had dusted countless times but had never been allowed to touch. Her voice came out steady. "That's it." The guards moved to break it open. Margaret's voice rang out behind them, sharp as a knife. "Don't you dare! You don't know what you're doing!" But the cabinet door splintered under their force. Inside were rows of folders, sealed envelopes, and metal boxes. Papers spilled out, some marked confidential, others stamped with government seals. Grace stepped forward, her hands trembling as she pulled the first folder free. Her eyes widened. These aren't just adoption papers. Richard leaned over her shoulder, his face hardening as he flipped through the files. Bribes, payoffs, donations disguised as contracts. She's been buying her power for years. The servants crowded at the doorway, whispering in shock. Ben muttered, "No wonder she always bragged she could silence anyone." Then Ethan found a smaller, locked box inside. With shaking hands, he pried it open. Inside were two thin envelopes, each with a name written on the front in elegant script: Noah Westwood, Nathan Westwood. The twins stepped forward, their breaths caught in their throats. Noah reached out and opened his. Inside was the original adoption contract, signed in bold letters by both Richard Westwood and Margaret Parker. At the bottom was a seal that made it undeniable. Nathan opened his and gasped. It was a letter, written in Richard's handwriting years ago, never sent. "My sons, forgive me for leaving you in Margaret's care. I trusted her to love you as her own. One day when you are grown, I pray you will know the truth, that you were never unwanted." Tears streamed down Nathan's face. He wanted us. All along. Noah's voice broke. We weren't abandoned by our father, only by her. The servants wept softly. Grace wiped her tears, her heart aching with relief. Richard turned to face Margaret, holding up the documents. His voice thundered with righteous fury. "It's over, Margaret. These papers prove everything. The adoption, the lies, the bribes. Tomorrow the world will see you for what you are." Margaret's face twisted, her last mask slipping away. "You think they'll believe gutter boys and a maid over me?" she screamed. "Do you think the city will care about the truth when I've bought their loyalty for years?" But this time, no one stood with her. Not the guards, not the servants, not even Ethan. Her empire of fear had crumbled. "No," Richard said firmly. "They will care, because the truth speaks louder than lies." Grace stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. "And because kindness is stronger than pride. You taught me that when I first gave them food, and now the whole world will know it too." The twins stood taller, their voices merging as one. "We are not shadows anymore. We are Noah and Nathan Westwood, and tomorrow the city will hear our story." Margaret screamed, a sound filled with rage and despair, and then collapsed to the floor, clutching her head. Her pride, her power, everything she built, it was gone. The storm outside began to fade, the thunder rolling away like a closing curtain. In the silence, Richard pulled his sons into a trembling embrace. Grace stood nearby, her heart full, her tears flowing freely. Ethan moved beside her, whispering, "Thank you. You saved them. You saved all of us." For the first time, Grace let herself smile, not the quiet smile of a maid hiding her heart, but the bright smile of a woman who had carried kindness through storms and now saw it bloom into a miracle. The next morning, the mansion gates were surrounded by reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones waved, and the truth poured out. Richard stood before the crowd with Noah and Nathan by his side, adoption contracts in hand. Ethan and Grace stood behind them, the servants watching proudly. And when Noah began to speak, his voice strong, his story raw, the world finally listened. Grace watched it all, her heart swelling with pride. Years of secret kindness, of food hidden in small boxes, had led to this moment, a moment bigger than anything she had imagined. The poor, pretty maid who once fed homeless twins in secret had unknowingly fed the future, and now the world was ready to be surprised by what those boys would become. Where are you watching from? Tell me your city or country in the comments, and if you've loved this story, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and share it so more people can learn the power of kindness. Because sometimes the smallest act changes everything.